All right, we're going to start with this Snowflake project. So we're in Onshape. Click the Create button and create a new document. We've already started this in class, but we're going to start over. Whoops. I didn't title it, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a title after I created it. Let's do this Snowflake. And this is the third attempt. Actually, it's like the fifth attempt for me. So I'm going to name it Snowflake 3. You can name it however you want. And the workspace here, the first thing you want to do is create a sketch so that we can start drawing. As with most projects, you need to start in 2 dimensions before you can change anything to 3 dimensions. So we're going to start with the 2-dimensional drawing. And we're going to choose to draw on the top plane. So I can either click over here to select the top plane, or select the top plane from these visual planes in my workspace. So I'm going to choose this top plane, and so now this sketch is ready to go. I'm sketching, and I will be sketching on the top plane. Now my planes are still visible. I can still see the front and the right plane, and I can still see the top plane. So I want to hide those so they're not in the way visually. You can either click over here and hide one at a time by clicking on the eyeball, or you could do a shortcut key on your keyboard, which is the P key, P for plane, and that hides all of the planes with one click. So now I'm viewing this in space kind of from an angle, and I like to view my sketch just like from the top, like you would if you were drawing on a desk. So I'll review kind of the controls here with your mouse. If I wanted to try to orbit to view this from the top, I would need to hold down the Shift key and then click the click wheel, and then I could try to orbit to where my sketch is perfectly flat, which is kind of hard to do. But that's just a little review on how to orbit. So now I'm just kind of spinning around in space. The other thing you can do with your mouse, the click wheel, is pan up and down. So I need to go up, down, left, right. I'm just clicking on the click wheel without the Shift key, just the click wheel itself, and that's panning up and down, left and right. And then the last thing you can do with your click wheel is zoom in and out. So I can scroll forward to zoom in and scroll backward to zoom out on the click wheel. So the click wheel is what you use to navigate your workspace. The actual mouse click is used to select items and move stuff around. Alright, so back to where we want to be. I want to view this sketch straight on from the top. So I can do that in a couple ways. You can use this view cube here to navigate to specific views. So you click on a view and it's going to take you there. So if I wanted to view from the right or the left or the back, I can click on those. What I want to view is from the top. So I click on the top and there you go. Another quick way to do that, so if you're just interested in getting to view your sketch from the top, you can right click and select View Normal to Sketch Plane. Now we're ready to start sketching. So the first thing I want to sketch is a line. And I'm going to use the line tool, which is over here, and make sure that it is connected to my point of origin, which is that center dot there. So I'm going to click there to start my line and drag straight vertical. You'll get used to this, but these little symbols that appear as you're drawing are called constraints, and they lock your drawing into a specific orientation. So right now I want to lock this in to be vertical. So I want to see that screen tip there, that little dashed line that's vertical. I'm going to click to place it. And it's going to act as though I could draw another line, which I don't want to do at this point. So to get out of the line tool, or any tool for that matter, is you click the escape key. So get really familiar with that on your keyboard. Escape is how you get out of something that you don't want to do. So I don't want to draw any more lines. I'm going to press the escape key to get out of the line tool. So I have my first line in my drawing, and I want to give it a dimension. Here is the dimension tool. This is one that you will use a lot. So I'm going to click on that, and then click anywhere along the line. Anywhere, see the line is highlighted there, yellow. I'm going to click there somewhere on the line, then drag away to the right. Now I have a dimension that's attached to my cursor or my mouse, and I need to place it somewhere. I could place it to the right or to the left. I'm going to choose to place it to the right, and I'm just going to click to place it. Now is where you put in the actual measurement. In class I said the maximum was going to be 50, but I changed my mind. It's going to be 75. So now I have a line that is attached to my point of origin that is vertically constrained and is a length of 75. Now I want to change this line's properties. I want this to be a guideline instead of a real line. You'll learn the difference really quickly. So a construction line is just kind of a guideline in your drawing, and it doesn't create a boundary. So I'm going to switch this line by, let's see, right now I'm still in the dimension tool, so be careful of that. If you're in a tool, you need to press escape to get out of it. So I'm going to press escape to get out of any tools, and I just want to select my line. So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click on this tool here, which toggles between a real line and a construction line. So I'm going to click that, and now my line has turned to a dotted dashed line here. So anytime you see that, that's a construction line and not a real line. This is going to be the representation of the center of the main trunk of my snowflake. Here's my inspiration here. So that line would be, this would be the point of origin, and then this construction line is going right down the center there. So now I'm going to get into something that is a little bit complex. We're going to create this main trunk, and we're going to use a rectangle to create it. So this is a new tool. The rectangle tool is over here right next to the line tool. And to create a rectangle, you just click one time to start. It's going to place your rectangle in your workspace. Then drag away from that point to create a rectangle. I'm purposely going to create this just out here somewhere in space, and the dimensions are completely off, and I know that, but I'm going to dimension this real quick so that at least this line stays the thickness that I want it to be, which is 5 millimeters. We use the dimension tool and make this 5 millimeters. You just need to press the number. You don't have to do the for millimeters, because our units are millimeters. Now I want this trunk to be attached to the point of origin right in the center of the rectangle. There's a couple ways I could do that. I could try to move this thing over there with the move command, but an easier thing to do is just to determine that I want the center point of this line, like the midpoint, to be attached to this point of origin. So I want those two things to be connected, the midpoint of this line and this point of origin. So I'm going to be creating that constraint. So we've talked about the coincident constraint, which is how we attached our line down here. We've talked about the vertical constraint, which is how we made this line vertical. So there's a lot of different constraints in here. What I'm looking for is the midpoint constraint. So go ahead and find that. Now that tool is set to the midpoint constraint. Now I need to choose a line that I want to connect. So I'm going to choose this line here. So make sure you're on the line and not on one of the points. So I want to just click on the line, and it knows that it's right now just finding the midpoint of that line. The next thing you click on is going to attach the midpoint to that point on your drawing. So I'm going to click here, and you can see it right away. It just jumps right over there and connects the dots. So the midpoint of that line is now connected to the point of origin, which is what I wanted. I'm going to use that same tool to connect the midpoint of this line to the end of my construction line. It's going to shrink it down to match this dimension here, 75. So now my rectangle is 5 millimeters by 75 millimeters. And you can see we started off with a blue rectangle. Now everything is black. All the lines are black. So as you're drawing, when something becomes defined completely, it will turn black. So this rectangle is defined by these dimensions. There's nothing in question. It's attached down here, and it has defined height of 75 millimeters and width of 5 millimeters. So it's all defined. The other thing you'll notice is that this rectangle is an enclosed space. So inside there's a light blue shaded region. Anytime you see that, it indicates a closed space. So now we've created our main trunk here. What I want to do next is create this first little branch. So I'm going to go back to my drawing and select the line tool, and I want this line to be connected to that main trunk. So the branch is connected to the trunk. So as soon as I get close to it, it turns the line turns yellow, and I get that little coincident constraint little icon there, meaning if I click there, it's going to be attached to that line. So that's what I want. I want to attach it. So I'm going to click there to start my line. Then I'm going to drag away, and this is supposed to be at an angle. And I want to avoid any other constraints. So I don't want it to be like horizontally constrained to that point. I don't want it to be, vertically constrained or horizontally constrained. I just want it to be at an angle. So I'm just going to click here at an angle. Now the next point on my line needs to be a right angle, because we're creating like a rectangle. So in relationship to this line that I just drew, the next line needs to be a right angle or perpendicular to that line. So I'm going to click about right here and then attach this line back here. But as I'm drawing, I want this to be parallel to that first line that I created outside that trunk. So I'm going to create a line that is parallel. So there's a parallel constraint that appears, and then also a coincident. Now I don't want it to be vertically aligned with that. I want it to be a coincident. There we are, coincident to the line and parallel to the other line. So there's actually two constraints happening on this point of my drawing. So I'm going to click there, and we'll take a moment just to view constraints. So I can, if I hover over a point, I can see what kind of constraint is there. This line is parallel, and let's go ahead and show it in a different way. Over here in your sketch properties, you can click show constraints, and it does kind of really jumble up your drawing. The more constraints you have, the more it's going to look really confusing. But this can be helpful in determining what is happening with your drawing. So this parallel constraint, once you hover over it, you can see which two lines are affected by that constraint. So these two lines here are parallel. Now this line is connected to that line with this coincident constraint. Same with that one. These two lines are connected together. You got a perpendicular constraint. So you can see all of these start to make sense. You have your midpoint constraint that is attached to that point on the end point of your construction line. So all these things are starting to get locked into position. Before I continue on, I'm going to go ahead and define a few things. Let's go ahead and disable the show constraints. I'm going to go ahead and define this dimension here. Now I've done this a few times, like I said, and I want this to be 3 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and do 3 and then enter. You can see that stretched this out and it moved the position of this line, but it's still connected. That's because it will always be constrained to connected to that line at that point. All right, and then the other thing I want to determine is the angle of this line, because I want to copy that as we're going down the trunk. So you can see in the drawing, all of these are coming out at the same angle. So I'm going to determine that angle by using the dimension tool. So click that. And then we're referencing two lines to get an angle. So I want to click on one line, it doesn't matter which order you do, and then click on the other line. And now you can see there's an angle that appears that I can define. Right now it's about 47 degrees. I'm just going to make that a even 45 degrees, which is easy to remember. And there we have everything defined except for the length of these here. If I defined one of these with all of our other constraints, the other one would also be defined. So I'm going to go ahead and just dimension one, so this is all locked in position here. Whoops. Let's go back to that tool. Let's just say this is 3 millimeters. The other thing that I haven't, so there's another dimension I haven't done, the distance between like here and there. So this could be placed anywhere along the trunk right now. That's why it's still blue. So if I want it to be completely defined, I need to tell it where it's located on the trunk. So I'm going to place one more dimension. It's going to be between this point and this point on the trunk. Well, let's say that's going to be 3 millimeters. It's going to move that down. So now everything is defined. So that first branch is locked in position. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is create the next branch. And this one has a funky thing coming out of it. So it's got a similar branch, but then it has a perfectly horizontal piece that goes right there. Again, we're only drawing half of this right now. We go back to the Snowflake. Go back to the line tool. And I want to be constrained again to the main trunk. So I'm going to click here to start it. And I want this line to be parallel to that line. So I'm just going to kind of hover over it for a minute to allow the computer to kind of be. Then let's see if I can reference that. It's not going to reference that. So we're going to be parallel to that line, which means this will be also at a 45-degree angle from the main trunk. I'm going to click there and then click here, then head back down. And before I get to the trunk, I'm going to click and then make a little jut out here. I'm going to make this vertically aligned with that point of the branch. So you can see how now there's like a dotted line there indicating it would be connected to that point. So I want it to be vertically constrained to that point and horizontal. So it's perfectly horizontal in my drawing. And now I'm going to make it vertically constrained as I go down and then connect it to the main trunk here. That kind of looks strange. Let me go back to this. And I could have gone back into the angle but there's something else going on here. Let me zoom out so I can get a perspective. So this probably should have been stretched out a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is force this to be longer by giving it a dimension. Say this is 7. And then let's go ahead and make this dimension. Let's do 3. That looks a little bit better. This should probably be a little bit longer, but we're going to leave it for now. And then we're going to go ahead and go in here and do the last branch here. I'm going to attach it to the trunk, let's say about right here. This one is a simple rectangle at an angle, so I'm going to reference this line over here. I want it to be parallel to that, so I get that parallel constraint. I'm going to click about right there, and then make sure that's a perpendicular relationship, and then again parallel to that and coincident to the line, so connected. Whoa, that didn't work. That last leg is not correct. So let's go ahead and make it our last line here. Make sure that's parallel with that as I'm drawing it and making it coincident and parallel right there. Okay, now I'm done drawing all of that stuff. So if I wanted to, now I could just create some dimensions that will define it even more. Let's say I want this to be, let's go ahead and drop this down closer. So I'm going to dimension the distance between here and here. Make that be 30. And then this here, I'm going to dimension and have this be 5. And then let's go ahead and dimension this line here. It's going to be 4. And let's dimension the distance between this point and the bottom. And let's make that 45. Nope. Let's make it 40. No, it'd be 50. Maybe 55. That looks good. Let's make this smaller. Let's make that 2. And there's just something not quite right about this. Let's make this one 15. There's something in my drawing that forces this to be where it's at. So I'm just going to leave it there instead of trying to figure out what's wrong. Mine's just going to look a little bit different. Well, every snowflake is different, right? So now I have what I'm trying to get at here in my snowflake. I've got this half of this trunk. So the rest of this could be a shape. I have this shape here, which is a hexagon. And then I have these circles here, which I can define later. So I'm going to go ahead and, at this point, start to model my snowflake. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of any extra lines, and this may actually delete some dimensions. So at this point, you should make sure that everything looks the way you want it to on the one half of your trunk. And they can look different, that's fine. There's no judgment here. Now we're going to trim away the extra lines. So all we want is the outside perimeter of our shape. So anything on the inside is just extra stuff. So I'm going to click that. So I'm here in the trim tool. Make sure that's selected. I'm going to trim away any extra lines. Now you may think that's a line there, but that's actually a measurement line for this guy here. I think. Whatever it is, it's not a real line. It's just a measurement reference. So I don't need that line. I don't need this line here. And I don't need this line here. And I actually don't need any of the outside of the other half, because I'm actually going to get rid of that line too. And get rid of this line. Alright. So now I have a perimeter of the shape, the outline of my snowflake. So the next step is to create a mirror, so a mirrored image of this on the other side. So now I'm going to use a new tool. It's this tool here, the mirror tool. The first thing it's asking you to do is select a mirror line. That would be the center line. So everything that I select to mirror is going to be equidistant on the other side of this line. So I'm going to click that. That's my center line. Now it says select entities to be mirrored. So I want this line, basically selecting all the lines here. And as I select them, you can see the mirrored result on the other side. I feel like I'm missing a line. There it is. And that line there. There you go. So now I have my main branch here. The next step would be to create that pattern or that repetition that goes around in a circle. So now I have all of my lines here. Now I want to create a pattern that is a circular pattern. So in your workspace it may have been set to the linear pattern. You want to click the arrow next to that tool and select circular pattern. Now I'm going to select an entity and it's going to pattern around the point of origin. Click on this guy. Again, I'm just selecting these lines. You can see it's starting to build a pattern. I know this seems tedious, but you're actually saving a lot of time because you don't have to draw each one of these. Okay, there we go. Want to make sure that you have all the different things that you need in this pattern. The last thing you want to do is click. You're done selecting things. Now there's a pattern here, and you can see right here is the number of times it's duplicated. So right now it's set to 3 times, and I want 6. No, I want 4. How many do I want? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I want 6. So I want to increase the number. So I'm going to select the number, change that to 6, press enter, and now you can see something that more resembles Snowflake. So the last things that we need to do are model these hexagons. So I'm going to start with the center hexagon. Oops. We go in and choose the inscribed polygon tool. And this works similar to the circle tool, but you're going to choose how many sides you want once you're done. So I'm going to scroll out and make sure that the horizontal tip is displayed. I want this to be locked horizontally. And I'm going to go ahead and click about right there. And the next thing after you click is if you scroll left to right, it increases or decreases the number of sides. I want 6 sides. I'm going to scroll until I see 6 and then click to place it. So that's the inside. So that's this portion here. Now I'm going to just use another point here, another hexagon, to define the kind of the in between or the empty space between these two hexagons. So I need to use that same tool again, click the center, make sure I'm horizontally constrained to my drawing. So there's a lot of different constraints going on. So I want to make sure I'm horizontally constrained to the drawing, or find something that works. This perpendicular constraint might work. Yes, I'm going to have to use that one because it's working and that's what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll in here and click, make sure it's set to 6, click again to place it. Then I need a third one. So right in between this one and this one is actually going to be empty space. So I need one more to define the outer boundary of that last hexagon. So I'm going to click that, or make sure that's still on. Click the point of origin, drag out, make sure it's aligned with my drawing here, and then click to place it. Click again to accept the 6 sides, and there we go. So now I have a bunch of lines in here that I don't need anymore. So the last thing I need to do is start to trim away stuff. And this is at the point where all of your patterns need to be the way that you want them to be, because we're actually going to break the pattern. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that this is turned off. If I can go ahead and show the constraints, there are a ton of constraints. So what I'm hoping is that we can start deleting stuff and it's not going to break anything. Let's just go ahead and turn those off and see what happens. Alright, so let's go ahead and go to the trim tool and let's see if we can start trimming out some of these lines. Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. Alright, it's working. So we're going in and we're selecting a lot of these things that just need to be removed. So instead of using the trim tool, I think you can just select items and then delete them. So let's try that. Let's turn that off. And let's try to select some lines here. Nope, that's not going to segment it out. See if I use this and delete it. Nope, they can't be deleted. Okay, well, let's go ahead and go back to that trim tool. Just keep trimming out things that we don't need. So you kind of want to think before you delete some stuff. Make sure it's part of the actual shape that you want to keep, and you're not deleting something that is necessary. So this, all of this in here is just going to be a blank void. So I don't need any of these lines. Actually, that line right there, I might have wanted to keep. Let me go back to this. Yes. So these lines here are important to keep. Without them, this center portion would just float away. So I need to keep those lines. Let me go back to my drawing. So again, I'm just going to use Control Z to bring back any lines that I should have kept. So there's quite a few of them here that I should have kept. Okay, I think that's it. So I'm going to start from the outside and work my way in, just so I don't delete something I shouldn't. Let's go ahead and choose that trim tool. So I don't need that, and I don't need that. But I do need to keep these, so don't delete those. There you go. But I can get rid of most of all this stuff in the center. Don't worry if some of these dimensions go away, because you're actually getting rid of the references. That's why it's important to make sure that your drawing is the way you want it to be before you start this process of trimming it away. Alright, so all of that's trimmed away. Let's go ahead and make sure that stays there, that stays there. So this one can go away. And that little guy. Kind of plays tricks on your eyes. All right. If this ever gets super confusing with all this stuff, you can commit the sketch by clicking on the check mark, and you can kind of view this in a different way that can maybe reveal some lines that you still need to delete. So there's a couple lines in here that I need to delete, but we're getting really close. Go back into my sketch by double clicking, and I can still use that trim tool, getting rid of all these lines that I don't need. There's another line. Okay, I'm just kind of visually checking all this stuff out. These little lines here, I don't need. Alright, so this looks pretty cleaned up to me. So, here's our snowflake. I'm gonna commit that. And the last thing that I would be doing is identifying the portion that I want to make into a solid. So now I'm going to go to the extrude tool and choose the region that I want to extrude. And I want it to be, let's say, 3 millimeters thick. And then click the check mark. And you can check out your snowflake. So if I wanted to, I could create some holes here by drawing some circles and then patterning them around the center. And that would be about the only thing that's missing from this drawing. So your assignment is to do something different from this snowflake that we just did together as a class. Using the techniques that we just learned, you're going to go from the two-dimensional drawing, the sketch. Make sure that you plan out symmetrically how you're going to go about doing this. So we learned a lot about the line tool and a lot about constraints. So as you're drawing, just pay attention to the different constraints, and those are meant to create relationships between angles and lock things to be parallel and make sure that they're connected to one another. So as you're drawing that, you create a region that is a defined space with no openings. You'll know that there are no openings when it is shaded blue like this. If I were to get rid of one of these lines, it would be broken. That's not a region anymore. So now if I go to if I accept the sketch, my extrude does not work because there was not a region to extrude because it's broken. So I'm going to go back a step to fix it. Alright, so hopefully that all made sense. The goal of this first exercise is basically just to get you exposed to what it feels like to draw in CAD and use one of these CAD softwares. And if you enjoyed it, awesome. If not, and you struggled, and this is just not your bag, this is the week to drop and to explore a different option. So I hope you did enjoy it, and I hope you have fun creating your unique snowflake. Just remember, the only things that are defined are, you have the limit of the length of one of these arms can only be 75 millimeters, and your trunk needs to be 5 millimeters wide. And that's for a specific purpose that we'll learn later. So those are the only two things that you have to be mindful of: the overall length and then the width of the main trunk. There needs to be at least a 5 millimeter section of your snowflake at some point that goes kind of from the edge to the center. All right, have fun.